Hey, what's up, man? How are you?
How's it going? Can you
Hey,
hear me?
welcome, man. Welcome, welcome. How you
How are
doing?
you?
I'm very
Hear me?
good. Yes, I can. Man,
Good
I
one,
I
good.
am really digging the energy of your space there with the vinyl, and
Oh,
it's so cozy. Mine looks way too like Spartan. Oh my
oh,
goodness.
that's all right.
I'm heavily digging it, man. So how does the day find you?
Oh, good. It's been a typical day.
That's good. I mean,
Yeah,
again,
yeah,
we have to cherish the average-ish typical days in this era of hopefully not World War III. I just say it
yeah.
all
Right.
hyphenated at once. I just say it like that.
Yeah, yeah. No, I understand that for sure.
Yeah, and I will say that times like these, it's and it's not superlatives or anything. It's genuinely art can bring so much solace and so much again for the artists themselves. Like nothing really takes your mind off some of the heavier stuff than actually creating, and then also immersing into some of these worlds like
Yeah.
Echo Lands. I'm loving Echo Lands. So
Oh, thank you.
yeah, man, for
Thanks very
sure.
much.
No worries. So
Yeah, that's
well,
what I've been working on this week. So,
I'm here's the thing is so I know Gabriel uh Lopez, I think. Or I can't remember. He did Lock and Key and stuff, and he did
oh,
sort
Gabriel Rodriguez.
Rodriguez. He created Sword of Ages as well, which is
Yeah,
this another kind of amazing kind of
yeah.
monomythic Hodorowskian. And I dream of this. We're here in Australia. It's like we have some conventions and stuff, but I just would love to at some point like head over there and just be like, oh, cool, and just maybe be present at maybe it's like the latest volume releases for both and but I suppose that does we obviously have the sword, we obviously have Apocryphon year 10
Yeah,
years to dive
yeah.
into
Crazy. It's been 10 years already.
trippy, right? And thank you for
Yeah.
this amazing gift
Oh, nice.
to the world of these designs which have endured. And we were talking about monomythic elements, things that endure across time. And you have, I believe, a pretty strong innate sense of what kind of again you've obviously would work with Batman and everything, and I think one of the huge reasons why that superhero thing is taking place is because there's this I suppose it's ever present in mythology folklore. It's the that story of the hero, and
Yeah.
uh, however, what we're wonderfully exploring is the dimensions of the gray area of like um and the apocrypha, even like the stuff that
Yeah.
it's we're getting into the nitty gritty now. Like we've the genre has evolved this much. So I guess I not to just sort of maybe put you on the spot, but
No,
when
that's
it comes
fine.
when it comes to your like just personal leanings, you slid like I don't know, some exotic amazing fish into this perfectly, like you just like for someone who had a lot in that sort of superhero sphere.
Uh,
When you were announced as the Apocryphon artist, like I mean it's still visually one of the it just jumps out from the discography of just this, again, certain colors that you chose. I mean it's so arresting.
yeah.
It's to this day extremely unique album art. And so I'm wanting maybe, and if that's all right with you, this opportunity to dive into like the color choices and the themes and all
Oh
that
yeah.
stuff that you talked about with JD. So feel free to begin wherever you would like in terms of Apocryphon.
Oh, well, I mean, let's see. The way I got got the gig in the first place, I
Mm-hmm.
was already a sword fan,
Mm-hmm.
which helps immensely when they come calling, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I just randomly got this email from their manager. I think through my website. Like I have a
Mm-hmm.
contact button through my website, and I think that's the way it originally came. So whoever was doing their managing for them at the time reached out to me saying, the band loves your stuff. They're comic book fans and they love what you're doing. Are you interested in doing album art? And I was like, yeah, it's like a no-brainer for me. Um, and it was it's a fun process because you get to hear demos of the recordings and things like that as they're going along. Um, but as far as the creative process was concerned, you know, early on, I don't know if there was a name for the album at the point of our first discussions. I can't remember that. But once I learned what the album was titled and JD's description of what the meaning of the term is, Apocryphon, that immediately opens up the creative doors, because then I can kind of go, okay, now I know how to navigate possible directions. And one of the first things we touched upon before even thinking about what the visuals would actually be was one of the things about the word Apocryphon, I think JD was saying, means secret writing. And that led me to think about stuff I had learned about studying a little bit of metaphysics stuff. So Austin Osman Spare, if I'm saying that correctly. Mm-hmm. One of the things he, I don't know if he's the originator of, but he was one of the people that helped cultivate this a thing called Alphabet of Desire. And the Alphabet of Desire is essentially invoking what you want out of the universe, out of reality, through essentially almost creating a secret writing. Mm. So the basics of Alphabet of Desire is, say, if there's something that you're desiring or wanting to accomplish, a goal, whatever it may be, that you write it down, you take the first letter of each word and form them into a sigil.
I mean, this is what I do literally with the quantum myth. It's literally everything I do. This is incredible.
And so just based on that simple notion alone, when he said secret writing, I'm like, oh, that's what I told him about it. And he's like, oh, that's really interesting.
He would have lost his fucking little JD mind. All right.
And so we decided right then and there to use it somehow. And so I was like, just in simple terms of a graphic design, regardless of meaning, using sigils formed from the song titles on the back cover as example, without saying the song titles, stuff like that. So it has this sense of like, when you look at the art, just that one little detail alone makes you feel like, oh, there's something to excavate here. Mm-hmm. It feels a little discovery, looking for discovery.
Yeah, right? That notion of and then also the notion of obviously runes and sigils have the idea of that the entire essence of that thing is contained within the rune, and that's what with designing symbols. Yeah. So
and then when the meaning, in terms of deeper meaning, that's where I applied the actual incantation aspect of this ritualistic practice, where so I told each one of them through JD. At the point, I didn't get to speak to other members of the band that much. It was all through JD at that point. So I told JD, I'm like, what I want is for each of you guys to think about something you want, a goal, and just tell me the letters, because that's the trick. That's the trick of it, is I don't know. No one else knows. Only you, only the person performing the ritual is to know. And so I said, just tell me the letters and I'll create a sigil for each one of you. And that's how the individual sigils came to exist. And then JD took it a little bit further and provided a set of letters to create a sigil that represents something for, I don't know if it's for the album or some greater thing for the band as a whole. And that's where the sigil that's more translucent on the front comes from. So that's where some of the actual practice, deeper meaning other than just pretty graphics.
And I just think because there's that, and there's allusions to this in some of the graphics you've you've that you made part of the sort of design layout package, which is beautiful, by the way. And thank you for that gift of your people, the kids. I don't know if they use this, but the Flickr account that you have
cool.
with these extremely beautifully high res. And obviously, as you've been explaining, I've actually been doing my editing magic so that like this, you can like those old 1970s documentaries. I mean, it might even add some like crackly 70s effect as you're describing these things. And also, especially when you were saying about, tell me the first sigil. I mean, and with the sagely beard, I mean, I'm sure, I don't know if you were bearded back then, but I'm sure, were you? Yeah, you did? Yeah. So, and obviously if it was over the phone, we didn't have, I guess, Zoom or Skype as like well developed as we have it, but I can, like, that itself conjures an image. So to any listeners of the show who are talented and kind of want to depict that, like that moment of JD kind of almost having that, again, if this wasn't the internet and you were in like a caravan somewhere in the woods, be like, tell me the first letters of everything you desire, that's a very, very vivid image, man. Well, thank you. I'm sure, have you probably shared that in I'm certain some publication or maybe another interview, or is this a exclusive, as the kids would say?
Yeah. And and then I think that was one of the first things we stumbled on, and then we started having more discussions about his ideas and thoughts and feelings about the lyrics that were written. But one of the themes that kind of came across a lot was about sort of a return and a rebirth in a way. And so that's where some of the ideas of the iconography comes from, where, like, the front, you see this dead world that's split open and the molten cores coming out. And I chose a very hard edge for that, a triangular edge, to almost feel like it's a slice taken out, to show that there's still life inside the world. And then on the back, it sort of translates even further, where you see, the sunflower springing up from death into this beautiful sky, being invoked by this goddess-like figure.
Hence all the colors, I think, maybe because that color indicative of life and the blooming of renewed, like Genesis, all of that beautiful kaleidoscopic. Yeah, it all makes sense now. Yeah.
And some of the imagery that we chose for the interior were all kind of sprung off of those too. So like the interior shots on the CD is harder to see, but on the vinyl edition, you can really see like the diagram that I created, which is, there's a couple diagrams. One is the pieces of a cell.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah. The other one is a diagram representing the layers of the earth. But then one of the other ones that might be kind of surprising to people is Quetzalcoatl being used. And Quetzalcoatl often is termed as being associated with the apocalypse. But the true definition of apocalypse actually just means change. And so everything about what we were talking about was about some sort of evolution, some sort of change. And so that's where all that stuff is originating from.
All I wanted to say was, I don't know if there's maybe some subconscious notion of because again, etymology is so fascinating as well. The prefix or whatever, apocryphon, apocalypse, maybe some kind of subject matter fusion happening. And honestly, and what I meant before is if, because I love the idea of hidden knowledge, and I like almost maybe the idea that you weren't allowed to tell this unless 10 years had passed. I don't know. Right? But according to the edicts of like some ancient society. But that's what's fun. And I think something ever renewable, ever reinterpretable, which so it's music, as you mentioned, like you already connected to it. Jody has in his, he opened first album, self-produced, W.B. Yeats, that quote about "Come away, O human child, to the waters and the wild." So all of that notion, but the first two albums have this sense of ending, the sense of the sundering and things falling apart, and long gone are the ages of the alchemists. But this album has this notion of ending but beginning, because it's the end of their sort of fantasy trilogy, if you will. But it has this notion of birth, right? And and that's the feminine the imagery of the red as well, red so prominent in sort of mythological depictions and color psychology of like indicative of like birth blood kind of thing. And so birth blood, again, magma, so what I'm saying is you are a gift to the art form of visual art. Thank you so much.
Well,
I have to say that, man. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I mean, I don't know if some of my, because the background I came from is, from with comics, all the visuals have one goal with comics, and that's to tell a narrative. And so I think, that probably translated a little bit to my work on this, and same with my work on the Blondie album that I did, where I tried to take ideas or feelings that the music might invoke, and give it a narrative aspect. So every piece is placed where they are very purposefully, and trying to build a picture in more vague terms, a sense of narrative to the visual. Even if the listener isn't picking up on what all those meanings are, they feel like there's something there. They feel that there's a narrative.
I mean, you'll hear production designers talk about that all the time. It's like, we built the whole set. We know the camera actually won't fall on certain aspects, but because it's there, it's an energy thing. And it's, I'm so glad you brought up cells and the evocation of both. Like, for example, with what I do is my stuff is based off of morphogenesis, which is the scientific term for the manner in which shapes of all kinds are created, which accounts for why like the capillaries in one's eyes resemble the roots in the ground, and the lightning kind of arcs, all following that same kind of fundamental electricity. And to hear that there is that notion that, well, if you look at a cell, and if you look at the earth itself, there's these layers, this kind of commonality. And another thing is, I was talking about this recently about symbolism and the feminine, the masculine. Again, things break down in essence, like with atoms, like positive, negative, and then circles and lines. And obviously the line is the masculine, phallic, the circle, the feminine, the round. And with the universe being this expanding thing, being this essentially inherently feminine thing, because of that circularity, and then planet Earth looking circular. What I love is that with your album, with the album art representing renewal, it's like, and that's that feminine, powerful figure retaining the mystery, but also that it gives that hope that, for me, I mean, I'm not trying to be like white knighty or whatever. I just think women are like biologically extremely good at leading, and like, so the idea of like this woman like rising and then leading the new planet into this like primal, connected with darkness, connected to one's shadow, like beautiful birth of, so like things coming out from the secrets, coming out from the darkness. And it's I don't know, there's even, I'm not, again, I don't want to bandy that word around, but there's like a beautifully feminist kind of component to that, of like, there's some, I mean, and JD, he has this essence of, just like the great poets, he has this payanification of the feminine, like the cloak of feathers, which I think you maybe, was that a little bit with the woman with her like the cloak of feathers, a little bit of allusion there? Yeah. So man, like, like I said, I think art for me is so connected to storytelling. I do like art unto itself sometimes, but 9 times out of 10, we're all living a story right now. Like you right now, this is part of your story. And so when something is infused narratively, it's, that for me is the indicator that it's like, oh, this is,
And, and a lot of times people misunderstand narrative, or the meaning of narrative too. I had a little bit of an interaction with another comic artist colleague of mine on Twitter, and he was talking about, he's mainly known for being an artist, but he does write too. And he was talking a little bit about being a writer. And I don't normally jump in on things, on those conversations, but I just couldn't help but say, well, there's so much thought put into creating a comic book that just being a comic book artist, you're already a writer. It's already a form of narrative. And then I ended up just making a simple statement where I just ended up saying a visual is narrative. So even a singular image is trying to communicate, right? All narrative really means is communicate. And so I kind of can't, for me, creatively, yes, it just depends on which medium you're choosing to communicate. One could be a visual, like a single image. One could be a series of images that are interconnected or related, such as the Sword Apocryphon album cover,
Mhm.
or something more fully fleshed out, like a comic or graphic novel or a film. Or another medium would be poetry or prose writing. It's all the same thing. It's all narrative. We're all trying to communicate something in one form or another in whatever ways we think we can achieve it with.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah. For me, because one of the things that gets leveled a bit at abstract art is that it is just this sort of unconscious, sort of channeled, just with no story. But that's what the quantum myth for me is about. Is
Right.
I call them capturings of infinity, and the fundamental web of, I call it the ever shaping, right? Which is
Right.
at all times, whether it's the sentence you just said or the week that's to come or the week that was, everything is a series of patterns, everything's a story. And my notion is that, along with sometimes, these secret societies who are like, believe that things are planned out and everything's mapped out, I consider it to be this like invisible lattice work along which everything from, again, like even the breath, everything is part of a story. It's a narrative inherently. And I never really believe in visuals in a void,
Yeah, exactly.
Visuals are always, again, and it's just we're temporal beings advancing in one direction. And what is that? It's a story. Like you cannot escape the story.
And I agree. Abstract visuals are a form of communication too. It is a narrative.
Yeah,
just
exactly.
It might be for some, it might be a narrative that demands of the viewer to decide what that narrative is for themselves, because it is abstract. Yeah. So it's how they interact with it. That's the story that's happening, is how they interact with it. Or it's trying to convey some sort of feeling, whether the viewer is picking up on the accuracy of that feeling in themselves versus what the painter or artist like yourself is trying to put into the feeling as they're creating it. So I definitely agree with you, where if there's pushback from people that abstract art isn't telling you anything, it's like, no, that's nonsense. It's still a form of communication.
Well, speaking of communication, all art is two things. It's never just the person putting it. It's like, then it's about the interpretation, and then it's you've put it, and as soon as the pen hits paper, that becomes two things. It's you putting it and then someone receiving it visually, and then again, 99.9% of the time attaching a story to it, attaching your mood that you're into it. That's why I love, and I quite enjoy the Rorschach element of art, where and that's some of my stuff, is like, what do you see? My landlord a long time ago is like, well, I see Satan in this one here. And I was like, well, I wasn't with that landlord. I know. I was like, that's really heavy. I think he saw one curled out little, because this is like based on like an ancient kind of forest kind of ritual.
Oh, that's cool.
Of like putting sort of branches and twigs, and very much like the central character of the Apocryphon depiction. She would be in the woods somewhere, throwing like squirrel guts together with like mushrooms and twigs and branches, and like mixing it all around, and then reading the wisdoms of the universe. So I mentioned, and again, I like to be very unfettered. I'm Italian heritage, so it's like you show the love, right? And sometimes like if you was in person, I'd be like, and this is the Australian part, I'd be like just smacking, like super, because I just think the way that you've created this insanely multifaceted over, of I will say, that comic sphere, the superheroes and stuff. But it's interesting also that we entered, like, it's almost like it's come full circle from the 10 years with Apocryphon, with this sort of fantasy, arcane Montaigne, all of these, medieval and fantasy aspects, and now Echolands, which I just find, like, I'm pleased if you wanted to maybe, because I've been looking into it, but you can give a bit of an Echolands update if you'd like, for people who, and there's obviously going to be art in the edit
Yeah,
layer
yeah,
of this one here. So I know you're creating this big piece.
yeah,
Yeah, and I know that you're collaborating with another creator on that
yes,
one. And
yes.
but how has it been for you, Echo Lands, and where do you see it going? And go for it.
Well, Echolands, for those who don't know, is a comic series I'm developing over at Image Comics with W. Hayden Blackman, who I worked with on Batwoman over at DC. We've known each other for a long time, and Echolands is something we wanted to do for a very, very long time. And it's kind of a hard premise to lay out simply, but basically, we're dealing with a set of characters in a world that pretty much any genre you can think of exists in this world. So it's populated by people who stem from these various genres that have evolved over time. So it starts off in San Francisco, but it's unlike any San Francisco that you would recognize. But when I say any genre, I mean, we're like very literal about that. You could be standing next to a cowboy character, next to a cyborg elf, next to, a universal film style monster Frankenstein character, and just on and on and on.
So good. I love it.
So it has, but then there's also there's a fantasy element to that, and we introduce that there's magic involved, but there's also science and science fiction elements in there too. And so the basics of the story is our main character, Hope Red Hood. It starts off just after she has stolen this gem from the tyrannical wizard Taros Demond, who basically is this guy who everyone calls him the wizard. He seems to have some sort of crazy powers, and he is the typical autocrat, but filtered through a fantasy type of lens. So this gem is important to him. We don't know why. To her, she just thought it was cool, but because she stole it, she's opened up a whole can of worms, and it sends her and her companions down a path that will lead them to the discovery of the truth of where they are from, what the Echolands actually is. And so it's going to raise lots of questions that we don't necessarily answer for you quickly as we go, because we want those answers to reveal themselves to the reader in a natural fashion as the characters themselves discover them. We don't want to spell it all out.
Perfect.
But we that's where it's headed, is to what the secret of the Echolands is. And once they understand that, I think once we get to that reveal, readers are gonna be like, what?
I love it, man. It just reminds me of, and it's crazy, I never got too much into Lost or anything, but like I do love like Lynch and Twin Peaks, and I just things where there's a central mystery in like, and again, it's interestingly also in line with Apocryphon, this idea of secrets to be shown and secrets to be found. Again, something very primal and also childlike. The child who's always discovering things is, everything's new to them, as they go along. And yes, from what I've seen, like I'm going to be done. And I suggest, and I like to intimidate my listeners, actually, if you don't, you need to go right now, pause the episode and go get Echo landed up. Seriously. It's looking incredible. And here's the thing, what's the benefit? And I love the kind of cross-pollination of things is I want this to have launched, inquiries into, all these different spheres we've been talking about. Again, I always love eclecticism. And when you talked about this thing being, hey, these two artists like yourself and your creative partner, it's that omnidirectional. I love that word. Can go anywhere.
Yes.
And there's nothing quite like an omnidirectional premise mapped to the monomyth. And so I don't say this lightly, like that sounds like one of the most exciting adventures to join a pair of creators on. So I'll be definitely, following along for sure.
Cool. Yeah, we hope people end up enjoying it. It's, going to be a long journey. It's a lot of hard work. I mean,
Of course.
the time it's taking to produce some sequences is insane. But we're hoping by, as we go along, and once the thing is all said and done, that my hopes are that we've produced a work that people will want to revisit. I heard from one reader that went back and reread the issues because they were reading as they were going and writing me little letters. But they reread it all, and they were like, they mentioned that they got more out of rereading, which is what you want, So I feel we're on a good path if that's what we're doing, where people feel like they get rewarded by multiple readings. They're getting more out of it. There's more things to see, and we're hoping that just keeps expanding as we go, because the first 6 issues that are now out, that's only the beginning. It's only this scratches the surface of where this thing can go. I did an interview for the Comics Cube right after issue 4 came out, or was it issue? No, maybe issue 3. And we get to the end of that issue, and he himself was like, I thought I knew what this thing was.
Right.
And I get to the end of that issue, and he's like, what the hell? Because like all of a sudden there's like this, giant robot like from Shogun Warriors or something like that, and he's like, what? And so that's kind of an example. What I mean is, like, you just don't know what's going to be around the other corner.
It must be so exciting for you guys as creators
too. So
too.
much fun.
Yes, that's what I mean. And one thing is, because, and I get this feeling from both of you is for people I don't know, like, again, comics don't come out of a vacuum. Ask any of the greats, the J.H. Williams, the Mike Mignolas, whatever, they'll tell you it's long, hard, hours and days. I've had Chet Zar on this one, Richie Beckett. Richie Beckett's he's a crosshatcher, so it's this poor guy. But what I'm saying is, like, that's life. That's like every J.H. Williams page. It's almost, you can almost imagine like a little floating number. It's like, what's that number? Well, that's the amount of hours this man poured into this individual frame, right? And I think it would shock a lot of people. So you infuse,
for sure.
And I just think when there's that amount of creative dedication applied to these stories, which again, you have this eclecticism to you, this multifacetedness to you, that it absolutely inherently, like as a spillover, as a byproduct, whatever you do is infused with that eclecticism and that depth, and it absolutely makes rewatches and like rereads like super worthwhile and additive. And I always say, it's like, why not rewatch that scene? Why not rewatch that movie? It's like the editor has seen that probably more times than you'll ever see it in your life. Like, this thing has been kind of massaged into its shape, so it's like you're always rewarded with closer viewing, and when there's work like with depth, like what you create, man, for sure.
Yeah, in a project like Echolands, it definitely, okay, so my work in general on every project I've done always has taken me a long time. I'm just I don't know why. That's just my natural pace. It takes me a while to do what I do. Echolands kind of steps it up, because many of the things I've worked on prior were based in worlds that somebody else already created, Batman or Sandman or whatever those universes were or are. The iconography is already there. It's already, it's a wellspring to draw from. But when doing something like Echolands, where you're basically creating that from the ground up, it's all this world building involved. And when doing a world as elaborate as what we are, that all just it takes so much time.
Of course, you're world building at the same time.
Yeah, the thought processes in terms of the writing before we even illustrate anything. And then on top of it, we decided to do something a little nuts and turn the book on its side and make it landscape. And a little funny story about that is, at the beginning, we decided pretty early on that's how we wanted to tackle it. But when it came time to start illustrating, I was like, It's no big deal. It's the same. I'm working on the same number of inches. It's just turned on its side. No big deal. And I was so wrong. The learning curve was steep. So, and it's still, some pages don't work the way I think they will in my brain, because I'm coming from, 20 years of
vertical
professional work, working on a standard comic. So when I see images in my head, I easily go to that shape rather than this shape. And so it's constantly this adjustment, and that takes time, because you're like, oh wait, does this actually work?
You're in IMAX, you're in widescreen.
Yeah. And then you do that, and then you throw in sequences like the sequence we're working on now takes place in this land that's in Echolands called Horror Hill. It's all based on black and white horror comics and black and white horror films. And so everything I'm doing there is fully rendered in black and white. So full on rendering, because we're not going to be using any color unless if, like, the character Hope, she's in color. So she's walking around in color in this black and white world. But everything else being in black and white. So the amount of rendering involved to get the right effect is a lot of time. So I have found that this entire sequence, every 2 pages, is taking me 2 weeks or a little bit longer. That's a lot of hours. And so when you do the math, 24 pages an issue and so on and so on, it's like,
it should, I think it should be standardized. There should be on every comic, maybe even like a removable, translucent, whatever, but it should be like in the bottom right corner, it's like two adult men poured actual back-to-back three full days of their lives into this thing. You're holding 3 days of human life in your hand in the form of paper. But I love that aspect of a bit of the mad creator to you, which I like, but that idea of subverting and surprising yourself with a decision, to kind of, I just love that, man. I love that for you, that you're discovering these people who are on these multifaceted artistic creative paths are like, you are living right, like you are doing life right. And when we catch up, maybe however long, another 10 years, it'll be nice to be like, yeah, no, so I had to do this holographically, right? And I'm like, JH.
The book and a hologram comes out.
So yeah, exactly. I mean, I just love that. It's great. It's great, man. Well, I'll go through some of these, like, kind of, just while we'll pepper in the sort of sword stuff, man. With the, and also, by the way, links to everything Echolands in the description. Just jump in. I want it to be a giant Echolands party. I want to see that bump. I want to notice. I want JH to message me and say, actually, after that episode, whoa ho ho. So I want you to make me look good and make JH look good. Okay. Sweet. I'm gonna write a story called "The Tale of JH and JD." So these guys creating this. It's so funny. I mean, I've said this to Jay. Yeah, maybe you can even, because you have that channel to him. He's notoriously Wonka-esque, which I love. I love this, the sort of gregarious and talking, but I also respect the creators who are like, I just don't, I just make stuff, and it's like, that's fine. But I've been saying to JD for a while, like, I need like, about JD, of him. I spoke with Brian Ritchie and Kyle Shutt and Trivet Wingo. They've all three of them. I haven't spoken with Jimmy yet. Jimmy still hasn't been on the show, but JD is very, very narratively gifted. The Night the Sky Cried Tears of Fire, again, phenomenal. I've been looking for Dan, he's a native Australian, Dan McFarlane. He's vanished. The artist of Warp Riders has disappeared from planet Earth. We can't find him. And apparently Kyle Shutt was like, we owe him money. Like, and they said it on my show. I'm like, well, okay, well, I guess I'll reach. I mean, I had to mention it. So if you, I don't know, man, know someone who knows someone, we can't find him. So I started a subreddit. I've started a subreddit and a hashtag, like, where is Dan McFarlane?
How funny. That is so weird.
Yeah, we'll get there. So weird. But back to it. I did, again, maybe 5-10 years. I just want to be like, okay, yeah, I used my JH, that, the club of people whose names are just too like the initials. The JK Rowling is probably part of the group. JD, all the J names, whatever secret society. And you're like, Albert, I was able to get him to adapt Apocryphon into. I could so obviously see Apocryphon as like a little mini issue.
Oh, for sure.
These are the things I dream of as like with my producer brain. I'm like, well, obviously things didn't come together for the 10th anniversary, but at some point, just a little mini. I love the mini issue of like, it's the story of the woman and it's her imagining this new world, and it's just this beautiful kind of Jodorowskian imagining of. So I would love that. I'd love for you to adapt so much of, like, I just think you and JD have a great kind of narrative artistic alchemy, which was so, I mean, it just spilled forth. So did you guys ever maybe contemplate creating something together, or you helping him with one of his stories, like representing it visually? I know that Kyle said that he's for the longest time wanted a sword comic or anything like that.
It was at that period of time we did talk about being interested in doing a graphic novel. I think he had even sent me some sort of premise of some kind. So there was some discussion of it, and he himself had thought about doing something like that. I don't know if him or the sword as a whole still have an interest in doing something like that. It would surprise me if they did, because I know how much they seem to really like comics. So like some sort of graphic novel thing would be super cool. It's just a matter of when and how, right?
I know.
But it was brought up briefly to collaborate in that way on something. But life takes you in different directions. They live busy lives. I live a busy life too, and so it's like some things that just don't materialize for whatever reason.
But here's the thing: is again, as this. And I do call you a mystic, because you have created sigils and you've imbued them with symbolism and wisdom. You've put them into the universe and you've tied them to creative acts, and you are a ritualist in many ways. I think every art piece is a ritual. So what I genuinely see is that we've spoken this, you've said this, it's out in the world, that has, and words snowball, like they manifest. So what I would love is for all the people who, because who knows what podcast reaches who. It's almost like a message in a bottle, right? This could end up in the ear holes of some IDW, whatever publisher, who's like, well, I fucking love Warp Riders, I fucking love Apocryphon, and I every time I listen to it, it feels like a sequence of chapters. And again, you have this great sense of nomenclature, like of I always think the best albums, like every song title could be like the chapter of a book, and so I think you made a lot of people tuning in, obviously, like grasp the lawnmowers and like maybe do one of these while driving. It's like, what, a sword comic, or
so even I even could see getting them to, like if Echolands ever became something more than a comic, like if it became a TV show or a film or whatever, they're the first people I would call, like to possibly do music for it.
Hell yeah!
That would be pretty dope, right?
there is a film score inside that man, JD, and Kyle and Brian and Jimmy, and it is the film score
all
of
incredible
Echolands.
musicians. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, and we'll get Tim Grander involved. He's doing, what is it? I had Chet Zar on a couple of days ago, and for the Tool podcast stuff, and he was like, this dystopia book, it's been taking him ages. He's like, it's because the Kickstarter and all that. But what I would love to see is so Tim Grander, he's doing, I think it's like Planet of Doom or something. And he's done some stuff with Skinner as well, music video for High on Fire and stuff. And everything's just waiting there. It's just about timing. These ideas write themselves, as they say, is you and so many. But the thing is only so much time, only so many hours in the day and stuff. But I'm just manifesting all good things. Just know that you have I do I have that privilege actually to be this sort of conduit to be able to express on behalf of the community. I'm a creator, but I do love being part of these.
Yeah.
Again, it's all free or whatever. It's all, that's why I use all the other official logos, because I just don't want to make anything of it. I just want to showcase and signal boost and have conversations like this. And so if I just want to say, like, you have so many people listening in who are just falling over themselves going to find out more. JH Williams. Also, I fucking love your website. It is, you're not allowed to change it.
It needs sprucing so badly. It is so
no. Okay, all right. If you want to, but I will screen capture the fuck out of it, because I'm trying to find little havens of the old internet before we all disappear and become TikTok stars.
Yeah. So it's old internet, all right.
Yeah, it is, but I love it. So no, it's cool, man. So but here's actually, one thing I could see, because we did talk about holograms and stuff, is I think, especially coming off of Echolands, and that's why I said it's a matter of when. I don't think it's going to be the material is strong enough that had Lock and Key become something, and that's just how things, especially Netflix and all of these properties, they're really ravenous. And one of the benefits of this, I guess you would say, unceasing, like this, just rights are being acquired and adaptations are beginning and animation centers are being founded. It's a lot of ideas now compared to maybe even 10 years ago have a pretty fairly good chance, and you've got like quite the quite the overt to you. So they see J.H. Williams, they see Creative Endeavor, they see, Legend of Vox Machina. I mean, have you heard of that? The Critical Role guys? Okay, check this out. Yeah, I don't follow it too closely, but a bunch of people stopped playing D&D 10 years ago. They start creating characters and they film themselves. That is a fucking animated series now, which is winning awards, right? Their D&D campaign, man. Yeah. So, I mean, I will be your Oceania region manager. I'll just be like, look, JH, he's got the goods. The Critical Role guys get to have their Legend of Vox Machina. Let's fucking go, man. Echolands animated. Netflix are killing it with animation, by the way. They have that Castlevania, so it's a, what is it? A shoe-in or whatever. It's like, it's meant to be. So I'm manifesting that for you too, man. It's definitely,
Cool.
It'll be a Michael Crichton situation where it's like, Steven, I'm writing the book. It's like, I want the rights, That's crazy. No, that's cool, man. Man, again, I'm speaking with an omnidirectional human being, so we could literally go in all kinds of directions. I guess we could say what your favorite song on the record is. Why not? Do you have a favorite? You're going to start some flame wars?
Oh, no, that's tough.
I pin you as a Cloak of Feathers guy just because of the album cover.
I was gonna say that one or Arcane Montaigne.
I love Arcane Montaigne as well.
Yeah, it's tough. That I don't know. That record is really hard to pin down to pick a favorite track.
Masters.
Yeah. It's all. I mean, all their albums are great. Mm-hmm. And of course, I'm a little biased, so I'm heavily focused on the record as a whole. Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, those two songs definitely stand out for sure.
Mm-hmm. Okay, there you go. Yeah. And now unleashed in the comments, and it's like, well, actually, just gotta love the internet that way. And obviously, I could not. Because there's a couple extra things, but I'm going to jump in and talk about your amazing shirt, right? Because come on, man, it's just so they just announced they're going to, because we do Monsterverse stuff. They're filming it. Actually, it's crazy, in Queensland, here in Australia.
Oh, no kidding.
The sequel to Godzilla versus Kong. I have to get. It's like, Sir JH, what were your thoughts on Godzilla versus Kong? What did you reckon? I fucking loved
it. It's like, I'm sure there's some people out there who are like, how could you love that? I'm sure there's haters on anything, but
it was fun.
I don't know. For me, the new set of films, regardless of, there's nothing that's perfect. Mm-hmm. I go in to watch something like, the newest set of films from Godzilla to Kong to Godzilla versus Kong, or Godzilla King of the Monsters or whatever. I just kind of like
have fun.
I go into them with have fun.
Yeah.
Do they there's I come out of watching a movie like that and like I have nothing to complain about. That's what I say, because it's like, especially, I mean, come on, if you're going into watching one of those and you're a fan of the old stuff, granted these feel dramatically different, but none of even the old stuff, it's not genius filmmaking.
No,
it's there to have fun and to watch something really bizarre.
Yeah, man.
And that's what I get out of the new ones. They're just much more aggressively dramatic, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
But some of the monster designs and things like that, I mean, they're just, and when you get, I don't know, I went into what, like when Kong first was being advertised, I was like, I don't know about this. And I was prepared to really dislike it. But when I watched it, I'm like, I can't help it.
Fuck it. Yeah. I love Kong Skull Island is great. There's all these layers to it, which Sam Jackson, he's like, you know what? This character, Packard, he's like Kong himself. He's just trying to protect, and all these kind of hidden layers, which I loved. And a couple of random facts. So Adam Wingard is now adapting Thundercats. The guy who
no way
he's fucking doing it, man, and he's stoked. He's like, I was directing Hollow Earth, and it hit me. Boom! I have an in. I've cracked the story of Thundercats. Let's go. So, a couple of years time. He's also, I think he's doing a sequel to Face Off. He's an insane human being. He's
a sequel to Face Off.
Yeah,
that's an interesting choice.
That's it. And second, I'm just these daggy facts because why not? And I love omnidirectional discourse anyway. So King Kong back in the 1930s, it was the Great Depression. That guy, the RKO, obviously facing bankruptcy. Who wasn't, right? But the power of King Kong, that which now obviously has become this, established iconography that is like even embedded in popular culture and like something very primal about the Beauty and the Beast and all that.
There's no one that doesn't know what that is. Yeah,
exactly. So that one actually helped revitalize cinemas, and however many decades later, almost 90 years, almost 100 years, it was Godzilla versus Kong that actually helped theaters get back on their feet after COVID. So it's these big monsters coming in to kind of save us, and so all kinds of discussions there. Also, you should probably start a podcast unless you already haven't already. Like you have this great.
I've thought about it.
Do it.
Yeah, we've thought about doing one. Me and another creator friend of mine, James Robinson. We every once in a while talk about doing one, but we're both so busy.
Of course. I'll give you
the fascinating thing about Kong is how unusual is it for here's this character idea for this gigantic ape monster character created back in the 1930s to have this strange worldwide life to such a degree that the character gets adopted into Japanese kaiju films, right? I mean, that is such an interesting thing to think about. So I wouldn't surprise that stuff is not as popular or as well known to say people who might know what Godzilla is, like the general public,
of course. So
it might have surprised some people at first that wait,
Godzilla
versus Godzilla, Kong. What?
Yeah,
but when you look back at the Japanese monster movies, there are quite a few of them have King Kong, and it's such an interesting thing because here's this one idea that started in an American film company, focused on American culture at the time, then get adopted and translated into Japanese entertainment culture. And now it's back here as this marriage of the two. It's nice. Super fascinating.
It's fascinating. And I know obviously they ran with the tagline. Also, this has become the Monsterverse podcast just for a little bit. It had the tagline, "One will fall." There's some contention about But for me, I mean, Godzilla won. Like, he put him in his fucking boom.
Yeah,
Like, come
yeah,
on,
yeah.
nail to the ground. I
They both
obviously
hit the floor a couple times.
they did. All right.
So
Okay. See, so we're not gonna. That's firmly established. Um, Man, here's the thing. Oh, actually, how long have we? Because I don't want to. Oh yeah, we're coming up right to the hour. That's cool. The podcast is instinct, and I think
oh, it's no worries.
no worries, man. Well, I figured. Look, thank you. Geez. Again, I hope. Hopefully, I encounter this meta thing that happens is when I have these opportunities to again be this conduit for this truly immeasurable amount of like human gratitude. I try not to be so esoteric, but you know, you can search hashtags a little bit. It's like sort of Apocryphon, people being like this art, this album, all of this imagery, the gift that my father, the mother gave me or whatever. Like, so you're part of so many people's like stories, you know, and also obviously way beyond the sword, obviously into your visual art and storytelling. And it's just, so just you're, and then on that, I always try to not have, when I say these things, get like to have the person be like, yes, I've heard it before. And I always try to find some way to impart that information in a new way that maybe does kind of get through, because
Oh yeah,
creators like
yeah.
you're notoriously humble, notoriously like deflecting, like, oh, please, no, none of that. But genuinely, man, like, thank you for being who you are, doing what you do. Like, thank you for existing. It's great. And like, it's clearly stuff that just comes naturally from you. Like, I always think the best artist is like, that's breathing to them. Like, it's just what they'd be doing anyway. And you're obviously going to have a lot of comic artists seeing your name, tuning into this. And I guess hopefully it's not too rote and not too trite, but if you had, I guess, a teensy bit of advice for people who kind of want to do what you do and create some album art one day and say, like, you know what, JH, like, he really put me on my path. I heard him on that podcast one time, you know, anything like that?
Well, first off, I mean, thanks for the very sweet comments. For me, it's like, I don't know, I always feel I really appreciate, people appreciate what I do. But at the same time, I always feel like I'm just being me. It's not a big deal. But thank you for saying that. Is means a lot. As far as good advice for people who want to pursue creative endeavors, I think it should be, it's tough because, and even tougher now, because there's so much pressure to bend to the will of whoever's presenting you the opportunity. And it's a tough tightrope to walk. But the biggest thing I can say is be true to yourself. Be who you are. Don't worry about trying to, oh, why can't I be like so-and-so or do this like so-and-so? That's tough to not do. It's tough to, that there's artists you appreciate. It's tough not to want to hopefully reach for that pedestal, So I'm not saying to disregard your influences. I show my influences on my sleeve with my work. But when I mean true to yourself, don't ever lose sight of what you want out of it. Don't ever compromise your position. That can be risky and it can be a scary prospect. But for people starting out, you have to be willing to take losses amongst your wins. And what I mean by that is, early in my career, there was a few different instances where I was promised one thing or I wanted something else out of the project and was willing to walk away from the opportunity because it wasn't meeting my what I wanted. A simple example is I got contacted by an editor to do a one-off comic that was an annual, extra long story in an annual. And at the time, I had a regular inker, or just had started a regular pencil inker relationship with Mick Gray. And they wanted to hire me to do this book, and I'm like, okay, well, I got my inker, to bring along, so we don't have to worry about that. And the editor was, oh, well, we already hired the inker.
Oh.
And I'm like, well, why'd you do that? Because how could you hire the inker not knowing who your penciler was already? And they're like, oh, I said, well, I and they're like, well, we already contracted this person. I'm like, well, then I'm not doing it.
Done.
I just was blunt. I was stuck to my guns. I'm like, I'm not doing it because I'm not getting the guy who I think is best for me. And that was the end of the conversation. The next day, they call me back and say, all right, you got your guy.
Done.
So that's what I mean. You have to be willing to take losses with the wins.
And that was pretty early in your career, you're saying.
Vision,
Yeah. Okay.
Without being a dick about it.
Exactly.
Be professional.
Yeah.
Don't get into, a shouting war with whoever's, hiring you to do something.
Yeah.
But be true to yourself. And that can be really hard when you're early in your career, because so many people operate, probably even more so now, from the fear of losing the opportunity.
Which can,
you have to kind of go with, like, okay, maybe that wasn't for me. Maybe another opportunity will come tomorrow or the next day. That's how you have to operate as doing creative endeavors.
That's good, man.
Being true to yourself, navigating the professional side of it, regardless of what you do creatively,
Amazing.
So,
I mean, I think that's applicable to just about every creative, sphere and vocation, even like layout and just like that JH moment, which let's just refer to that. It's that moment of just that gentle but firm, like you're starting out this thing, and it's true, because it's so early on, you don't have the momentum, and the identity of what you do is so important. And if you compromise it too early, then you kind of you
can fall into a trap where you'll be dissatisfied with what you're working on, because you allowed it to progress in a way that wasn't what you wanted. You know what I mean? Sometimes there's projects where you think everything's perfect at the beginning, and then it doesn't. Somewhere in there, you're like, oh, this project isn't working out how I thought it would. But if you start out at a point of where you've compromised your vision or your principle early on, you're setting yourself up to always fall into that trap. And this sounds terrible to say, but there's a lot of people who work in the upper echelon of this stuff, who are the ones who provide the opportunity, the ones who are doing the hiring. This is cynical to say, but I think there's a lot of truth in it. There's a lot of them that will take advantage of that.
Of course.
And if they see that in an individual, that they think they can always push them into something else, it's bad for you for your own creative health to allow that to go on. So I don't know what it was about me early on where I was just like, no, this is,
I love that.
I don't know. It's weird. It's like,
maybe you had probably seen someone.
It surprised me that was like that, because I wanted to do comics so much. I grew up wanting to do comics. I always foresaw myself being a comic book artist. So it's strange that I would be willing to take that kind of risk early on. But at the same time, I guess I cared about what I did so much that took precedent. You know what I mean?
Great child raising. That's all I got to say, man. It's all about nurture. You've got to. I'm a little bit of levity there, but I'm saying it's like, if you have to do these things, these self checks of like, hey, wait a second, how much of how I conduct myself and the decisions, like how much I say no and why do I say yes so much. Like that goes into like psychology and stuff. But I just think maybe pretty early on, maybe you'd seen certain film or like a certain mentor you'd seen as like, hey, it's important to, whilst being open to opportunities, like, and then there's that whole adage of like, you need to fill your own vessel first. You need to put your own mask on first before you put it on the person next to you, whatever. That whole notion that inauthenticity has a time limit, like, and even if the mask is like so similar to your own contours, it's like if it's not you, then it will begin to itch. And so you can't do an impression of yourself. You just have to be yourself,
and it's a tricky thing to do to navigate that too, because you don't want to, you want to be confident enough about knowing what you're after, but not be so much in a position where you're just closed off from what anyone else might be suggesting, because you want to be able to be open enough to take in what someone else might be thinking, because and be true to yourself, knowing that I don't know it all. Maybe they're right.
Right.
So to weigh those options carefully, it's super important.
Man, extremely eloquently expressed and universal, and definitely something for myself and then everyone tuning in to take something like from. But dude, it has been such a pleasure. We have to get you back on something in the future, like a whole bunch of different. I'm that OCD graphic designer / other that I really, when I just didn't see anyone doing anything, it's like, well, again, and don't be surprised if I eventually start up like the Echolands podcast. Like, don't be surprised. Because I just think it's like, why, if that conversation should be had, why shouldn't there be an outlet for it? And speaking about this perhaps podcast notion, I know you guys are busy, but all I'll say is the reason I can juggle all of these different outlets, and you'll probably start getting followed by like the Oddworld podcast, the Star Wars podcast. I just kind of went URL crazy one time. Is it's Anchor. There's this app. I think Spotify bought them out, so it's all totally free. You can upload even MP4s to it. It's just a browser drag and drop thing, and it sends everything to Apple and Spotify. So I can, if you're at that point, I'll just send you. It's this like 3-step thing, and I can imagine like as you're just inking, right? I'm sure you're having a bunch of thoughts, and so maybe these like personal diaries. Even it's like, hey, we're gonna, and people do art streams as well. Do you do those, like where people kind of they watch you paint and stuff?
I've thought about it. My wife keeps wanting me to do one or to do them, but
all right. I add my voice to hers now.
I always like when I'm working, I move around so weirdly sometimes. When I'm working, I always feel like, it's just gonna feel cumbersome. I don't know. And like I said, I'm a little bit slow on what I do, so I don't know how
whatever works.
How much people would actually be like watching paint dry. So,
all right.
I don't know, maybe one of these days. And it doesn't help that I'm technically challenged, tech challenged.
I got you, man. So that's why I call it's the semi-Luddite / Occam's solution. Is for me, it's I just get the faff out of the way. It's like, what's the simplest solution? And it's this drag and drop thing. And but so cool. I mean, because you have a smartphone, like I'm sure, like with the voice memos, right? You just record, boom, while you're recording. And again, this will be good because then you can just bring the phone with you around with you wherever you sort of. And I do the same. I draw kind of. I just move around, and you're just recording to it. Again, it doesn't have to be the highest quality. It's just like musings or thoughts or whatever. And then you literally go save MP3 after you whatever hour or however long you're drawing for. Drag it into a browser, and then literally that just sends it, and you just have like a little hey, don't have to do any post-processing if you don't want to, add editing or whatever. It's literally like JH's like video diary or like audio chronicles, and then to have each of those podcasts have like a little Ko-fi link or something. It's like, hey, if you enjoyed the stream, feel free to send us the tip jar thing or whatever. Like I always love finding different avenues for people. It's like, why not? And I'm glad that your wife had that notion, of just like, why not? So, but that's just
one thing that might be kind of interesting if I was to do it is to do it in a way that hopefully is slightly different
Mhm.
to where,
We're going to go horizontal. Sorry.
sometimes, like when I'm drawing, I have ramblings in my head about like as an example, the page I just got done working on, this character, ironically enough, has a cloak of feathers.
There you go. Meant to be.
But illustrating these feathers in black and white, because they're raven feathers, on little tiny images, is like I have these ramblings going in my head, like, nope, that's still not right. That's still not right. So it's like, I don't know if it would be
amazing
just to say that out loud.
Yeah, it would be great.
Yeah.
And I think, and then
I'd sound like
your wife will be like, what have I done? Because now you're going to be enjoying it. People are going to be donating and stuff, and it's like, we just want to hear JH's actual mumblings while he's drawing, like as an ASMR thing, like as a relaxing, ASMR is a whole other thing as well. Man, I'm sure we could talk for a bunch of hours, but I'm going to give you one of these daggy, I do these big Zoom hugs. Yeah, man, look after yourself. Have an amazing, it's been such a pleasure, as I mentioned before. And
yeah, it's been great conversation.
For sure, man. And so the Monsterverse, everything we touched on, you'll soon get followed by that podcast, because I just enjoy the admin of it. And man, have an amazing rest of the weekend. I'll edit this one together and I'll send you the links.
Sounds great. Let's talk again.
Talk again soon. See you, man.
Bye.